Imagine a single plant capable of powering every engine you own, a truth so profound it was silenced for decades, and its secret is revealed in one shocking number. This plant can fuel your diesel truck, your gasoline car, your generator, tractor, or lawnmower, literally every engine. Right now, the Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, are legally cultivating it in the same fields their ancestors planted 3 centuries ago. Many of you, after my last video, asked about gasoline engines, and I listened. The answer completely reshaped my understanding of fuel, because this remarkable plant yields not one, but 2 distinct fuels, one for diesel engines and another for gasoline engines. No vehicle modifications, no special parts, no mechanic visits required. In 2010, the University of Connecticut confirmed something with a single figure the oil industry hoped you'd never discover: 97%. Once you grasp the significance of that number, you'll understand precisely why this plant was outlawed in 1937. But before we delve into that, I need to share the story of a 1,937 document that eradicated this plant from American life for 80 years. Introduce you to 4 influential men whose names you likely recognize, and explain the disappearance of 2,000 fuel stations from the Midwest in the very year that law was enacted. Stay with me, even if you own a house, have never planted a seed, or rent your land, because what the Amish revealed to me about this plant is achievable on just 1 hectare, with merely a shed and a pickup truck. The first time I drove through East Hempfield Township outside Lancaster, I almost missed the sign, Hempfield. I assumed it was just one of those historic Pennsylvania place names nobody thinks about anymore. I drove another 20 minutes to meet an Amish farmer a friend had told me about. His name was Reuben. He was a quiet man with a strong handshake, and he spoke only a few words in the initial 10 minutes. Then, he led me to the back of his barn, pulled a glass jar off a shelf, and poured something resembling cooking oil into a small diesel tractor. The engine started on the first try, without hesitation. No cough, no black smoke. I stood there for 15 minutes waiting for it to stall. It never did. When I asked him where he bought the fuel, he looked at me as if I had asked the most foolish question in Lancaster County. He simply pointed to a field behind the barn. "I grew it," he said. That was the moment everything changed for me. The plant is hemp, specifically industrial hemp, or Times cannabis sativa. I need to be absolutely clear about something right now, because the confusion between hemp and marijuana was deliberately manufactured. Industrial hemp contains less than 0.3% THC, which is the psychoactive compound. You could smoke an entire bale of industrial hemp and feel nothing but a sore throat. The 2018 Farm Bill made it federally legal to grow, process, transport, and sell industrial hemp anywhere in the United States. It is as legal as corn, as legal as soybeans, as legal as wheat. However, for 80 years before that federal bill, hemp was treated as a narcotic. The reason had absolutely nothing to do with anyone getting high. It had everything to do with fuel, money, and 4 men who possessed more of both than anyone else in America. Let me begin by explaining what this single plant actually does, because once you understand this, the rest of the story will undoubtedly make you angry. Hemp seeds contain roughly 30 to 35% oil by weight. That oil can be extracted with a simple cold press, similar to the presses used for olive oil or sunflower oil. Once you have the oil, it can be converted into biodiesel through a basic chemical process called transesterification. You mix the hemp seed oil with methanol and a small amount of lye, which acts as a catalyst. The mixture reacts and separates into 2 layers. The top layer is raw biodiesel. The bottom layer is glycerin, which you can use to make soap. You then wash the biodiesel with water, let it dry, and it is ready to pour into any diesel engine ever manufactured. Not a modified engine, not a special engine times any times diesel engine. This is because the diesel engine was never designed to run on petroleum in the first place. Rudolf Diesel built his engine in the 1890s in Germany. He filed his patent on the 28th of February, 1892. His paper was titled Theory and Construction of a Rational Heat Engine to Replace the Steam Engine. He called it a compression ignition engine. The fuel he envisioned was plant oil. In 1900, he demonstrated his engine at the World's Exposition in Paris. The French government had asked him to run the engine on peanut oil from their African colonies. He did. The engine ran so quietly, so smoothly, that most of the people watching had no idea it was burning a vegetable oil. Diesel wrote that his engine could be fed with vegetable oils and would help considerably in the development of agriculture. He dreamed of a world where any farmer could grow fuel in his own field. He called it the oil engine, and then he died. On the 29th of September, 1913, Rudolf Diesel boarded the post office steamer Dresden in Antwerp, Belgium. He was traveling to England to meet with the British Royal Navy about installing his engines in their submarines. He ate dinner on the ship and retired to his cabin at 0 inches the evening, leaving word to be woken at 6:15 the next morning. When the steward knocked, the cabin was empty. The bed had not been slept in. His nightshirt was neatly laid out, and his watch was positioned where it could be seen from the bed. His hat and overcoat were found folded beneath the railing at the stern of the ship. 10 days later, a Dutch fishing crew found a body floating in the North Sea. It was too decomposed to identify, but they took the personal items from his pockets. His son later confirmed they belonged to his father. Newspapers printed two kinds of headlines that week. Some suggested suicide, others were darker. Inventor thrown into the sea to stop sale of patents to British government, or murdered by agents from big oil trusts. His wife opened a bag he had given her before the voyage. Inside was 200,000 German marks in cash and financial statements, showing their bank accounts were virtually empty. In his diary, a cross was drawn on the date September 29th. We may never know the full truth about what happened on that ship, but consider the timing. The man who invented the most efficient engine in history, who publicly stated that vegetable oils would become as important as petroleum, and who was days away from giving the British Navy an engine that ran on crops instead of crude oil, vanished into the sea. After he was gone, nobody at the engine companies pushed to keep plant oil as the standard fuel. Nobody asked farmers what they thought. The petroleum companies simply stepped in, adjusted the fuel systems, and made diesel fuel from crude oil the default. Within a decade, every diesel engine in the world was burning petroleum. The engine designed to free farmers became the machine that chained them to an oil company, and nobody stopped to ask why, because the man who would have asked was at the bottom of the English Channel. Now, many of you specifically asked about gasoline engines, your car, your lawnmower, your chainsaw. This is where the second fuel comes in, and this is the part that connects directly to what Henry Ford was trying to tell us almost a century ago. After you harvest hemp seeds for oil, you still have the entire stalk, thousands of kilograms per hectare of woody, fibrous material. That stalk is rich in cellulose, through a process called cellulolysis. The cellulose is broken down into simple sugars. Those sugars are fermented. The fermentation produces ethanol, the same type of alcohol that is already blended into the gasoline you buy at the pump right now. Every liter of regular gasoline in America contains up to 10% ethanol. That blend is called E10. The only difference is that the ethanol at the station comes from corn. The ethanol from hemp comes from the stalks of a plant that also gave you biodiesel from its seeds. One plant, 2 fuels, 2 types of engines, 0 waste. Henry Ford understood this before almost anyone else in the country. In 1908, his Model T was designed to run on gasoline, ethanol, or any combination of both. Ford told the New York Times in 1925 that the fuel of the future was going to come from fruit, from weeds, from sawdust, from almost anything. He said, "There is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented and enough alcohol in 1 year's yield of 0. 4 hectare of potatoes to drive the machinery necessary to cultivate the fields for 100 years. By the 1930s, Ford was hosting conferences in Dearborn, Michigan, about a movement called farm chemergy. The word comes from chemistry and the Greek word for work. The idea was radical and simple. Let farmers grow the raw materials for industry instead of importing everything from petroleum. Ford put his own money behind it. At his Iron Mountain facility in Michigan, he operated a biomass conversion plant that processed hemp along with other crops. The plant extracted methanol, charcoal fuel, tar, pitch, and ethyl acetate, all fundamental ingredients for modern industry, all from plants that grew in a single season. In August 1941, Ford unveiled a prototype car with body panels made from hemp, soy, wheat straw, and flax bound together with resin. Popular Mechanics Times featured it, and the New York Times reported on it. The panels were lighter than fiberglass. Ford demonstrated their strength on camera by swinging an axe into the trunk lid. The axe bounced back, and the panel did not dent. The car was designed to run on hemp ethanol. Ford even brought George Washington Carver himself to help with the development. He envisioned a vehicle grown entirely from the soil and powered by the same soil. He was 77 years old and swinging an axe at a car he believed would change the world, but by 1941, it was already too late. Something had happened 4 years earlier that buried this knowledge for 80 years. 4 years. That is all it took to erase a plant that had been American for 2 centuries. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was signed into law. Notice the spelling, marijuana with an H. That was a deliberate choice. The word was Mexican slang, and Harry Anslinger, the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, used it because most Americans had never heard it. If he had called the plant cannabis, every doctor in the country would have recognized it. If he had called it hemp, every farmer would have. By calling it marijuana, he severed the connection between a useful crop and the law designed to kill it. Before taking the narcotics job, Anslinger had publicly stated there was no greater absurd fallacy than the idea that cannabis caused violence. He did not believe it was a problem. But Prohibition ended in 1933, and the Department of Prohibition he oversaw was about to disappear. He needed a new enemy. Cannabis became that enemy. And he had friends who needed it gone for entirely different reasons. William Randolph Hearst owned newspaper chains, timberland, and paper mills across the country. Hemp produced paper cheaper and faster than wood pulp. It was a direct threat to his business. The DuPont family had just patented nylon and a new chemical process for making paper from wood. Hemp fiber competed with nylon, and hemp paper competed with the wood pulp process. Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury and the wealthiest man in America, had invested heavily in DuPont. Mellon was also Harry Anslinger's father-in-law. He had personally appointed Anslinger to the narcotics position. And then there was Standard Oil, the Rockefeller empire built on petroleum. Hemp oil as fuel threatened the foundation of everything they sold. These men did not need to conspire in darkness. They had newspapers, they had Congress, they had the Bureau of Narcotics. Hearst's papers ran front-page stories connecting marijuana to violence, to crime, to racial fear. Anslinger testified before Congress with cases that had no medical evidence behind them. The American Medical Association sent Dr. William Woodward to oppose the act. He told Congress the claims were not supported by science. His testimony was dismissed. After hearings that garnered almost no public attention, the act passed on the 2nd of August, 1937. Here is the detail that makes 1937 the most important year in the history of American energy, and almost nobody knows it. That same year, a fuel called agrol was selling at 2,000 service stations across the American Midwest, 2,000 stations from Indiana to South Dakota. Agrol was an ethanol gasoline blend made at a plant in Atchison, Kansas, backed by the same Chemeergy movement Ford had championed. Two blends were available. Agrol 5 had 5 to 7% alcohol, and Agrol 10 had 12, 5 to 17, 5% alcohol. The plant had been financed by the Chemical Foundation and opened in 1936. By 1937, motorists across the heartland were filling up with it. The brochure said, "Try a tankful. You will be thankful." The fuel worked. It sold. Customers came back. And then the managers of the Atchison plant started reporting something they could not ignore: sabotage, market manipulation, and vicious infighting from the petroleum industry. Agrol sold for approximately 5 cents per liter, while leaded gasoline sold for approximately 2 cents per liter, a mere penny difference. The oil industry lobbied against every tax incentive bill that could have closed that gap. The American Petroleum Institute publicly attacked ethanol as an inferior fuel. Between 1933 and 1939, petroleum interests killed 19 federal bills and 31 state bills aimed at supporting alcohol fuel blending. The American Petroleum Institute's own spokesman, Conger Reynolds, publicly mocked the movement, calling its supporters dream chemists and armchair farmers. By 1939, the Atchison Agrol plant closed its doors. 2,000 stations vanished from the map. An entire fuel infrastructure built by farmers, for farmers, was erased in under 3 years. The only commercial plant fuel network in America was dead, destroyed in the same 2-4-month window that the Marijuana Tax Act killed hemp. Same war, same years, different weapons, same winners. But one community never stopped growing, and they never needed a single one of those stations. The Amish settled Lancaster County in the early 1700s. The first permanent settlers began planting hemp around 1710. By the 1720s, the Pennsylvania General Assembly was paying bounties for every pound of hemp produced fit for market. So much hemp was harvested that when Lancaster County was officially formed in 1729, an entire township was named Hempfield because of the vast quantities of hemp raised there. In 1818, that township was divided into East Hempfield and West Hempfield. Both names survive today on every road sign and county map. Historian Les Stark documented more than 100 water-powered mills that processed hemp fiber along Lancaster County waterways before 1870. The Ephrata Cloisters grew hemp. Susanna Wright grew it at Wright's Ferry Mansion. Edward Hand grew it at Rockford Plantation. The crop was woven into ropes, into canvas, into lamp oil, into paper. The word canvas itself comes from cannabis. That is how fundamental this plant was. When the 1937 Act killed hemp across America, the Amish lost a crop their families had grown for over 2 centuries. They adapted, as they always do. They switched to tobacco, expanded dairy, and grew corn and soy like everyone else. But the knowledge of what hemp could do never disappeared. It lived in the same quiet memory that holds every piece of traditional wisdom the Amish carry, passed at kitchen tables, in barn conversations, from grandfather to grandson. Other Americans forgot the plant existed. The Amish simply filed it away and waited. They are patient people. They have outlasted every trend, every fad, every government program that told them to change. And when the time came, they were ready before anyone else in the country. When the 2018 Farm Bill made hemp legal again, the Amish in Lancaster moved fast. Reuben Reel, a young Amish farmer from Bart Township, founded Lancaster County Cannabis from his basement. He started with 45 kilograms of CBD flower and a handful of smoke shops. Within 4 years, he had contracts with Amish growers across the county. By 2023, his operation had moved 22,680 kilograms of hemp product. He works with farmers who use no pesticides, no synthetic fertilizer. They harvest much of the crop by hand with horse-drawn equipment. They need no electricity to process it, and the quality commands premium prices from buyers in California and the Midwest. The Amish did not need a government program or a university pilot study to tell them what this plant could do. They already knew. They had known for 3 centuries. If you already own a house and are thinking this only applies to people with farms or those building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need 16 hectares. You do not need a barn. Here is what works on a regular property right now. If you own any diesel engine, a truck, a tractor, a generator, a water pump, you can run it on biodiesel made from hemp seed oil today. You buy cold-pressed hemp seed oil in bulk. You mix it with methanol and lye in a reactor you can build from a used electric water heater for under $300. Plans are available online for free. The University of Connecticut tested this exact chemistry in 2010. Professor Richard Parnas and his team used virgin hemp seed oil and put it through standard transesterification in their biofuels laboratory. 97% of the hemp oil converted to biodiesel. Not 90, not 93, but 97. It passed every laboratory test, met American and European biodiesel quality standards, and showed something nobody expected: superior cold weather performance. The hemp biodiesel could be used at lower temperatures than any other biodiesel on the market at the time. Parnas told reporters that if someone is already growing hemp, they might be able to produce enough fuel to power their whole farm from the seeds alone. 1 crop, 1 press, 1 reactor. Total energy independence. For your gasoline engines, hemp ethanol is more involved, but completely real and completely legal. The federal government issues a free fuel alcohol permit through the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. You apply, you get approved, and you can legally distill ethanol for use as motor fuel on your own property. You are not making drinking alcohol. You are making fuel. The equipment is a small still and a fermentation tank. People build them in their garages. The process is the same one moonshiners used for centuries, except you are not hiding from anyone. You have a federal permit on your wall. The ethanol you produce can be blended with gasoline at 10 to 15% and used in any standard gasoline engine without a single modification. That is exactly what E10 and E15 already are at the pump. You would just be making your own supply instead of buying someone else's. And here's what nobody tells you. In Brazil, they figured this out in the 1970s. Brazilian cars ran on blends containing up to 24% ethanol. Millions of vehicles, decades of use, no engine failures. The technology is not experimental. It is proven. It has been proven for 50 years in another country. The only thing missing in America was the legal right to grow the crop. Now you have it. Here is the math. 4 hectare of hemp produces roughly 317 kilograms of grain. Press that, and you get about 83 liters of oil, which converts to approximately 75 liters of biodiesel. That is enough to run a diesel generator for weeks, or keep a farm tractor moving through planting season. That same 4 hectare gives you over 2,268 kilograms of stalk. The stalks produce cellulosic ethanol through fermentation and distillation. Between the biodiesel from the seeds and the ethanol from the stalks, 4 hectare of hemp feeds both types of engines from a single harvest. This incredible versatility demonstrates the potential for complete energy independence from a single harvest. And what happened in 1937 is precisely why you have never heard of any of this, with a man whose name you already know at its center. Scale to 2 hectares, and you have real, meaningful fuel production for a homestead. 4 hectares, and you are approaching energy self-sufficiency for a small farm. Austrian farmers figured this out years ago with seed oil cooperatives. They press canola and sunflower into biodiesel for their own trucks and tractors. They do not ask permission from an oil company. Nothing stops an American landowner from doing exactly the same with hemp. Nothing except 80 years of deliberately enforced silence about what this plant can do. And that brings me to the piece I have been saving, the one I found in a magazine archive that almost nobody opens anymore. This is the part I promised you at the beginning. In February 1938, Popular Mechanics Times published an article with the headline, "New Billion-Dollar Crop." The article was about hemp. It described a new machine called a decorticator that could process hemp stalks cheaply and at industrial scale. The article said hemp could produce more than 5,000 products from the herds of the stalk alone, plus textiles, food, and fuel from the rest of the plant. It called hemp the standard fiber of the world, and predicted it would create thousands of jobs and an entirely new agricultural economy. Here is what makes this document devastating. The article was published 5 months after the Marijuana Tax Act had already gone into effect. 5 months after the law that killed the industry, the most widely read mechanics magazine in the country was telling American farmers they were sitting on a billion-dollar crop. The editors did not know the law had passed. That is how quietly Anslinger and his allies buried it. By the time the article hit newsstands, it was already illegal to grow the crop it celebrated. The future was announced at its own funeral, and nobody in the room knew it. The timing was not a coincidence. It was a consequence. The men who wrote the law knew exactly what they were killing. They just made sure the rest of the country did not find out until it was too late, 80 years too late. Until a piece of paper called the 2018 Farm Bill quietly undid what 4 powerful men had done in 1937, and almost nobody noticed that either. The Amish did not read that article. They did not attend Ford's Kimmergy conferences or Parnas's laboratory at UConn. They did not need anyone's permission to understand a plant they had grown since before the Revolution. They kept the knowledge the way they keep everything, quietly, practically, passed from one generation to the next without anyone writing it down in a journal or publishing it in a study. Rudolf Diesel designed an engine for plant oil and disappeared from a ship before he could give it to the British Navy. Henry Ford built a car from hemp and ran it on hemp fuel and watched the law kill both. 2,000 Agrol stations sold plant-based fuel to Midwest drivers and were sabotaged into closure. A magazine told America about a billion-dollar crop 5 months after the law buried it. And through 80 years of silence, the Amish kept growing. You were never supposed to know any of this. Not the 97%, not the 2,000 stations, not the magazine that arrived after the funeral, not the engine that was stolen from plant oil and handed to petroleum. You were supposed to keep driving to the gasoline station, keep watching the price climb every winter, and never ask who decided it had to be that way. The Amish asked that question 3 centuries ago, and they answered it with a seed. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. I want to hear from you. If you could grow 4 hectare of hemp this season, what would you fuel first? Your truck, your tractor, your generator? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Hit subscribe, not for me, but for what comes next. Because in the next video, I am going to show you what the Amish build from the part of this plant that never gets burned, and the industry it threatens is even bigger than oil.